Welcome back. Working on puzzles again. I've already spent a few minutes on this puzzle before starting the video. I've examined all sorts of things, like this bishop protects me from the back rank checkmate. If I were to attack that, I would just lose the rook, and then coming here would just be another rook trade, and we would be left with equal pawn structures and opposite colored bishops. But what I've come up with after about 3 minutes of study is, what if I capture this bishop first? Because that then connects my two rooks. So I don't think, be in danger here, because I would get a rook and a bishop for a rook. So I'm thinking, if I capture this and the pawn takes my rook, then I get a rook. So I would get a bishop and a rook for one rook. And that's what I'm going to try. Okay. Well, I'm glad I spent some time on it, because that one had me flummoxed. And now we are in another end game where I am outnumbered. I have a slight pawn advantage over here. This pawn is not passed, but it could be if I choose to pass right now. However, if I do that now, I will lose my rook with check and then lose the pawn. So it makes me think that I should first take this rook with check, and then when the king or the pawn recaptures, then I should go forward here. And I have to count, because they've got 4 squares to go and I've got 4 squares to go. It would be my turn after recapturing the rook, so I would queen first, but then they would queen immediately afterward. And I would be here, one of these two. You know what? That tells me that I shouldn't go straight forward with this pawn, that I should go here. And my reasoning is that I would then promote on this corner square, which would protect this corner square from this pawn, which is headed there. I'm going to check just a second to see if there are any other options, but I don't see any other options. If I don't do something with this rook, it's going to get taken, right? And I don't have many other pieces to do anything with. Actually, it might not get taken. Unless I move this pawn, then they would take the rook with check. But if I leave these pawns here and say do something like this, they might just leave my rook there and go promote their pawn. And then I'm behind. Or I don't know, they might say check. And then I have to move my king, and then they move the pawn. That's why this looks like the most attractive move to me. The only other thing that looks better is this, or looks as good. I can take that pawn, which would be protected, but then they still can just move their pawn, and they're ahead in the race. The only way I get the first step in this pawn race is by this. Capture with check, which means they can't move their pawn. They have to either do this or this, and then I advance my pawn. Then I think the only question then is which pawn to advance. Okay, see, now they have 2 pawns. If I go straight forward, I end up on this square. So if I move this pawn straight forward, they're going to move here, because that way they end up on a square that I can't attack from here when I get my queen first. But if I go here in order to end up on the corner, then they would advance this pawn first, I think. Regardless, I think it's just either way, it's going to be the same amount of moves to the end, so I think I should take the pawn. That way it's not there in the future if I need to move my king here for some reason. That's my only reasoning. Let's see if it's right. Okay. And they chose that pawn, which means, yeah, okay. I would, honestly, when I did that, I don't know why they didn't move the other pawn. That way I would promote and then they would promote. But I suppose then I could check and continue moving until I could somehow capture it. I don't know. Either way, I would get a queen first. Okay. Doing a little better than previous days, but I am, 5 minutes in for 3 puzzles? Let's see. I do have a check here, protected, or safe, I should say safe check, not necessarily protected. No white pieces can block that check or capture my checking piece. So that would force the king forward. Then, probably in a game, I would just go capture the rook. It looks like I have just lost mine down here. But I'm guessing that it's not just a simple rook capture. I think it's check. King moves forward, and then there's a follow-up. For example, here, which has the added bonus of protecting the pawn. So that would be check, which cannot be safely blocked. For example, pawn blocking would run into just capture by the bishop. Same thing with the knight blocking, would just be captured by the bishop. So I think that would force the king to move again. My queen down here would be covering the back rank. So then with my bishop here, the king would be forced then into one of, nope, not that one, because that one would also be guarded by this bishop. So it would force the king to one of these 2 squares. And then with the bishop blocking that getaway, I could bring my queen back here to say check, no matter which square the king was on. And it could not move here because of the pawn. Would have to move here, in which case I could give chase with either the queen or the bishop. So I am guessing that's it. Fingers crossed. Okay. Again, I don't think it's this simple capture. I think it is a mating pattern. Because, again, if something goes unexpectedly, I can always just capture that rook. But the rook cannot capture me because the king is in check. Okay, it did try the pawn capture. That means they think they don't have a way out. Well, I was way off. Why didn't the king just move forward? Yeah, I honestly didn't see the queen there, but I guess it didn't matter. I don't understand. The knight was here, right? The knight was here when my queen was on the back rank. I don't understand why the king just didn't move forward. But it must have realized it would get trapped in here, so it threw all the other pieces in my way. Okay, well, you can't guess what the opponent's going to do if they have more than one choice. That's the lesson I'm learning from this. There are some of these puzzles where the opponent only has one choice. Those are my favorite ones because at least then you know probably what your next move will be. Here, wow. The queen has moved over, offering a queen trade. In most games that I have experienced, it turns out to be beneficial to let them take you because then you gain control of the file. For example, if I capture the queen, they just capture back. And then we're left with each with 2 rooks and a bishop, a dark squared bishop. And approximately the same number of pawns, although slightly imbalanced on the queen's side. There is a check. protected by this pawn, so then if they traded here, I would capture back with my pawn. But I don't know if that's any better than capturing back over there with their pawn. Is there something else? My queen is currently protected where it sits. If they capture me here, I will gain control of this file. But that's just queen for queen. There's something else, something that I'm missing. For example, that's not it, because that pawn is all that stands between me and this battery. Right now, this pawn is protected by the bishop and both rooks. So I don't think that's it. However, what if this is it? This is my thinking. What if I capture the bishop? They can capture my queen. I can capture their queen. And then if they take my rook, I get their rook, right? And this rook's no longer here from that battery. But can I do that after I take their queen? That's the question. What if I take their queen, they recapture, then I take the bishop? Then this rook is left hanging. That's why I think the rook capture needs to go first. But I'm about to find out. Oh, wow, I was right. Okay, but again, if I do this, then my rook, well, my rook isn't entirely hanging. Do I take the queen first or the rook? I think I take the queen, right? Let's see, take the queen. No, because that leaves my rook hanging. Right now, my rook is protected. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I have gone well past my usual 10-minute limit, so thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.